Welcome to Real Estate Hustlers Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Appleman, founder and CEO of Appleman Capital. Today we're joined with Eddie Speed. Eddie has over 40 years of experience, is the founder of Note School, and top expert in discounted mortgage note investing and brokering. Eddie, we appreciate you coming on the show today. If you could let the listeners know a little bit more about yourself.
How are you? Great.
Good.
Well, I started in 1980 as a note buyer. I had no really real estate background at that time. But my father-in-law, later to be my father-in-law, and another gentleman really were kind of my mentors, did that and kind of worked deeply under their direction for a couple of years. And then my wife and I married and we moved to Dallas-Fort Worth, where we've been in the note buying business ever since.
That's fantastic. So for the listeners, what exactly is note investing? And I guess just treat us like an elementary school student.
So in most cases, this isn't 100% true because we do buy some bank notes, but in most cases, your audience can best relate to somebody seller financing a property, right? You have a property, maybe it's a rental, maybe it's just a house that you just bought and fixed up. Maybe it's a piece of land. You say, hey, I'm not only the seller, but I'm going to be the bank. I'm going to offer financing to the buyer. And then your asset moves from the real estate to actually you own a mortgage against the property, a note, right? So a note is the promise to pay. It has the principal, it has the interest, it has the payment. And that note you can sell that just like selling a piece of property. And so I am what is the industry would call a note buyer.
Got it. Interesting. So does the property have to be free and clear in order for you to provide a note, or could it have another mortgage and then you're doing more of an arbitrage play where you're buying it at a lower interest rate and then let's just say you're fixing it up, rehabbing it, and then you do seller financing for a higher interest rate. Is that a play?
Yeah. So you can seller finance a property where there is an underlying debt. And when you create that seller financing, that would be referred to as a wrap note, typically. And so as you said, you could have an underlying mortgage with a lower interest rate, say it's at 3%, and then you owner finance the property at 9%. So then you're making a spread on part of the loan that actually isn't equity. It's just your underlying debt. So that's not on the note buying side. That would be more on the selling side where you're selling a note and creating owner financing.
Got it. Hold on one second. My speaker just came on. Sorry about that. This is not far off. Bear with me 1 second here. That's actually an news article. Sorry.
Oh, well.
Apologize about that, Eddie. Okay, so how does one get into note investing? How does one? Because in real estate, like we were just discussing before we went live, there's a graduation. You go into real estate investing, and then you more or less graduate to be the bank.
So most people who buy notes started out as traditional real estate investors. They either started out selling houses or land or mobile home and land or something like that. And then they transition over into buying notes. In my case, I literally started as a note buyer and I have a school, right? And I train people how to buy notes, right? So most people start out with some form of real estate experiences before they get to me. There may not have been a full-time real estate investor, but they've owned rental properties or they've bought and sold other properties and stuff. Occasionally we find people that join Note School that's really never been a real estate investor. They're kind of like me. They just like, okay, well, we would obviously think, that you're moving to the top of the pile immediately, right? A lot of people now want to be note investors because they've had rentals and they're not doing so good with them. That's a reason.
So I guess, what are some debunks from the industry that one was like, do you need to be the bank with millions of dollars of cash behind you in order to produce notes? Like, what would be the play?
Two things it's very interesting that we've been asked a lot. First of all, the theory that note investing is far more complicated than buying property, which I don't know why that would be true, right? Now, there may be people that buy property that don't know enough to actually be buying properties yet. But to go have the basics of safely investing in property, you'd need to know as much as you would to buy a note. And then the second thing would be, as you said, you run out of money. So one of the things that we're really good at is showing people how to recapitalize when they're buying notes. How do you reposition yourself and get your capital? How do you get some of your money out so you got more money to invest, right? How do you recapitalize?
Yeah, that's the main thing. Like with real estate, you're going to either sell the property or refinance, and hopefully you get some cash out to go and deploy on the next property. So
yeah,
I guess there's an arbitrage play to where you buy and sell notes, or you can roll them all up into a larger portfolio and sell them off, or give us some secrets of the industry here.
All right, I'm going to use my pencil. This is my drawing pencil from my computer where I draw on the whiteboard all the time, right? But right now it represents a straight line, right? And that straight line represents 20 years, right? This is a timeline of 20 years worth of payments that call it $1,000 a month. Okay. So we have $1,000 a month for 240 months, 20 years. Now, if you buy that note today, just say that you buy that note and you're going to pay $85,000 for it. Okay. That's going to give you $240,000 in payments, but you have to wait over 20 years to collect that. You're going to collect it incrementally over 20 years. Okay. But let's just say I come in and sell 12 years of payments. I bought 20. I'm going to sell the first 12 years worth of payments. We call this a partial. You sell that to a passive investor, somebody that had a rent house and doesn't have the tolerance to manage or, own rentals, right? Which is a lot of people, right? So they're going to get 144 payments for that. And mathematically, we show people how to run the calculation. Let's just say they're going to pay $82,000 for that note, right? So you invested 85, but you just got 82 back. So you only have $3,000 invested, and that $3,000 is going to throw off almost $100,000 in income on the backside of that note. That's an arbitrage. Now, there are ways that you can do that even on a monthly basis, right? That's a little bit different. That's a little bit of a specialty. You can't sell that to a passive investor, but there are insurance companies and specialized investors that you can do that with. So there's all kind of ways that you can use either borrowing money against a note or just selling a cash flow with the note that allow you to recapitalize.
That $82,000 that the passive investor brought in, they're going to get $82,000 back, correct?
They're going to get $144,000 back. Okay,
got it. Where does that come from? Because you still own part of the note, correct?
No, I own the 20-year note.
You own the 20, but you sold 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
So they're getting 12 years at, I think, was that $82,000?
Yeah, $82,000 investment, and they're going to get back 144. So say that's probably about a 7% return.
Okay.
Right. They got a piece of property. The property's, theoretically, the property's worth $120,000. The note has every reason that you believe it's going to pay well. All of these good characteristics to this transaction, right? And from that transaction, then you're going to have, you're going to own the note. Here's what people like about owning a note. Here's what they don't like about rentals, and they don't like about syndications that they like about notes. You actually get a return of your investment, a return on your investment, interest, and you get a return of your investment. You get your principal back. You don't have to wait till the end to get your principal. You get your principal as the loan pays off. And so people look at it and say, like, I know what I'm really making because I can see it coming back in. You know, when real estate is great, you get the big lift in value and everything's wonderful. But when real estate's not great, sometimes people don't get what they thought they were going to get. And like what people like about notes is it produces a real estate note will have far better cash flow than a rental. Here's pretty simple math. Okay. Josh, you have $250,000 in cash. Okay. So what am I going to do with my $250,000 in cash? Well, I live in Dallas, Fort Worth. And by the way, it's kind of middle of the markets. It's not extreme either way, but I live in Dallas, Fort Worth. And I have a $250,000 rent house. And that's going to give me $1,600 in rent per month, gross rent. I'm going to take 50% of that, and it's going to go out the door in expenses, right? I'm going to net the other 50% in income. So I'm going to net half of the gross rent in net income. My $250,000 gives me $800 a month in income. We take $250,000 and the average income, our average of what kind of income, what kind of cash flow you're going to get for $250,000 is going to be about $2,800. You get $2,800 to own a note, and you get $800 to own a rental. It's pretty good math.
Got it. That's and that doesn't, of course, you've got your renovation costs too, or eviction costs and everything else that can.
Yeah. I mean, once again, the ease of owning a note. I can own 1,000 notes for the same aggravation level of owning 60 rentals. That's what I've had. Countless landlords that have had thousands of rentals have told me.
Well, I think it's getting there though, because a rental you can of course purchase it, fix it up, refinance it, or sell it, put the cash, redeploy the cash. But it's more of like a fix and flip play up until you keep the stash cash in the coffers and build it up until you can get to a point where you can offer seller financing or offer or go out and buy notes. I guess what is the play if you don't have that kind of wherewithal?
I've been in this business 44 years, so I've created my own notes on my own property, but I bought 50,000 notes. So I bought 50,000 notes because I bought somebody else's note. I didn't have to go do all that work. I just bought the result of what they created, which was a note, right? So there's combinations. We've seen more of a pattern in the last 18 months that people come into note school and sell their rentals with owner financing than we've ever seen in the history in the industry in the past. Now there's a reason for that. We have figured out there's a pattern to it. What's the pattern? Well, rents went up by 20%, but expenses went up by 60%. So people's net income on rental is a far different number than it was, right? So for those reasons, that what they don't love so much about their rentals is they don't get cash flow. What they love about notes is they get cash flow. We can argue about appreciation and tax, but all those things are true, but you're giving up a lot to get that. And as people dig into it, there's no absolute answer for everybody. There's somebody in your audience that I don't know who they are, but there's somebody in your audience I'm not going to debate about all that because they're just they're entrenched in doing it the way they do it, and they're probably not going to change their mind, right? I've converted some very significant landlords that have long experience and deep number of assets they've had under management. And they've converted a lot of them seller financing because they say, I like the income and I like the lesser aggravation. So it just matters where somebody's at in their business, what their resources are, what their circumstances are. Somebody comes to me with cash, they can buy notes. Somebody comes to me with rental property and says, hey, can I convert these rentals to notes? Then that may be the way that they create their scenario.
Interesting. You touched on taxes, and of course, real estate comes with depreciation. But with the notes, you've got the income piece. Are you bringing it in as a return of capital, and then last it would be a return of capital if the note even lasts that long?
Well, you have an amortizing investment, just like if you made the loan. So an investment in a note from an accounting standpoint, it's going to look very similar to if you created your own note. What's your cost basis in it? And then how quickly are you amortizing down, getting your principal back? And that would depend on the actual investment itself. And then the balance of it is going to be interest earned.
What does that look like on a tax perspective? I know everyone's got their own brackets, but I mean, are you able to hedge I mean, obviously you are, but what are some of the strategies?
I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to sidestep that one. I know some tax hacks that are just crazy, but they're way too complex to try to bring up here today.
Okay.
I can show you how to turn around and sell a partial and it becomes an asset sale and not interest earned and all kind of, there's some things that we have learned over 50,000 notes that are pretty unique to the business. But here's what I tell people. Anybody that says, well, I don't want to buy a note, or I don't want to owner finance my property because I lose appreciation. And I go, well, let me tell you something. You got more than 3 times your net income in cash flow from creating a note. And if you think your appreciation is going to grow to be a bigger number than that, then I guess you ought to roll your dice and go for it. But it's probably not, right? We have entered a market right now that is arguably a note cycle. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm poo-pooing buying real estate, that nobody should buy real estate and they should all buy notes. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying to you is there's very favorable math to notes right now than way more favorable math to notes right now in the interest rate environment and in the environment right now of, cost of property versus rent of property, that ratio, right? For all of those reasons, we're in a cycle right now that you easily could say, well, we're in a very favorable note cycle. And usually when somebody comes and trains with us and goes down the road, we just show them examples. But when we do that, they're like, oh, okay, I can see that.
So for the listeners that they're wanting to, I guess, figure out how to get into it, they don't have real estate, they don't have cash. Would they be an originator? Are there other ways of getting into notes? You got to come
to the party with something.
Yeah,
right?
You got to.
You either got to have real estate or money or cash. I don't represent the beginner with nothing trainer. That's not. I have a school, and I think we're the Harvard of that school, of that business. But we generally have people that have investable capital or investable resources. Resources could be actual real estate. And so that's really who we serve the best.
Can I just compare it to a absolute triple net commercial property like a Dollar General, or because I mean at that point all the expenses are passed back to the tenant, and you're collecting cash and you're keeping your hedge, you're protecting your principal. Can you give us an example of one of the most unique notes that you've had during your career?
Oh, Lord, I bought a note on everything from a junkyard to a mansion and everything in between over the past 44 years, 50,000 of them. So, I bought notes on very unique collateral, castles, and, all different kinds of collateral. Bought a note on a house, or excuse me, on a avocado orchard, and there was a house in the middle of it, and that's where John Travolta lived.
That's pretty wild.
I,
And
I ran into John Travolta at a real estate mastermind, Collective Genius. I was at that mastermind about 3 years ago, and he was in this same resort we were staying in. And I told all these guys in this mastermind, I said, I'm telling you, if he stops, I will bring up something that he will be very intrigued at and want to talk to me about it. And so long story short, here comes John Travolta coming up. And he was very friendly, and he could have blown me off, but he didn't. And I said, hey, John, how are you? I said, funny story, I'm in the mortgage business, and I bought the mortgage on the avocado orchard when you used to live in the house in the middle of that back in Santa Barbara. And I mean, he spun around and talked to us for 20 minutes.
he probably knew some pretty cool areas in that farm, I'd say.
Yeah. And so, of course, he remembered this was when he was young. This is back in the 80s. And he remembered the whole property and the whole story and told us about it and stuff. And those guys in the mastermind were like, I said, well, I've been around it a long time. And so, yeah, have I bought some unique notes? I guess I have. John Travolta's, not really his property, but it was the property surrounding it,
That's definitely pretty cool. Tell us about if over 50,000 notes, I'm sure you've ran into it. So say that the payments quit coming in. What is your process?
Well, everything about note investing is risk management.
Yeah.
I mean, so, yes, we've had notes default. When you're buying a note that's performing, and we also buy non-performing notes, right? We buy notes where we know they're not paying. But when we look at we buy a note that we're buying that's performing, the first thing we do is measure off, like, what's the likelihood they're going to continue to pay? Like, what's the buyer's propensity to pay, their ability to pay, meaning, do they qualify? Do they have a track record of paying somebody else? If they get in a storm, can they get rid of the property? Right? In other words, all of those things really measure off, like, what's the odds you're going to have a problem? Yes, we've done tens of thousands of foreclosures because we've also bought a lot of non-performing notes. So we've done foreclosure actions in, north of 40 states. And, about half the states are takes longer to foreclose. And about half the states, it's a little more of a statutory process, and you don't really have to go through the court system to go foreclose. So those are all things that are just part of the management tool that you got to do. And those are variables that you have to weigh and what they cost. I would say that buying notes on performing properties that haven't paid, if I look back at the risk variables in the business, the manageable risk variables and the unmanageable risk variables, those have definitely fallen into the manageable category.
So the cash just quits coming in, and then you own the real estate. So yeah. You send your teams in, take an assessment, and then do you put it on the market? Do you resell another note? How does?
Well, I foreclose if I have to foreclose, and then we resell properties in our shop. We resell properties on a daily basis where we offer owner financing. Now we want to make sure the property's in good shape and that we have the right buyer. So we're not just like Wild West seller financing, right? We're trying to qualify a new buyer in a circumstance, but we're pretty good at it. We've helped a lot of people do that too, and we've had good luck with it. 44 years later, I'm still wanting to do it again.
Yeah, I mean, well, you're reselling quality paper, so the credit worthiness, they can. That way, you've got a good market you can feed to. And there's a market for everything, like you said. There's a whole distressed selling. I guess on distressed notes, you're looking at the asset more than the note.
Yes.
And anything, and forecasting the future. That's interesting. That's a whole other side of the industry. Yeah. And you have to have a different level of intelligence to play in that arena, which means there's barriers to entry.
Yeah. Once again, when somebody comes into note school, we look immediately. We're trying to figure out which puzzle piece they should be holding, right? Somebody comes in and they're very sophisticated like you, and they're they've never done it, but they're going to be trainable because they understand real estate and they understand certain things that the average person wouldn't. So then they're really good at like, okay, you could be very successful in buying non-performing notes, right? Somebody comes in and they're a high-end realtor, they're an engineer, they're a doctor, they're a dentist, they're a retiree, then they can own notes with a feeling very independent, right? They're not relying on somebody else to go do something so that their investment is successful. That's pretty good.
Do you do like would you? I'm not asking. I guess could you do a fund and the fund would buy notes? I guess.
Yes.
And then you would have your investors that like the industry, and because I can see this getting really boring, which isn't a bad thing, because ultimately if everything's going like it should, you don't have property management, you don't have tenants, toilets, and trash, and all that good stuff to deal with. You've just got notes.
Exciting investments sometimes aren't so fun.
Right. Right, exactly.
Boring investments sometimes are a really good thing, right? Yes, we've run a fund and we've helped people do funds. And so there's a whole kind of a litmus test that we can kind of lay over the top of somebody's model to see if they're really a fund makes sense. There's other ways to really do it short of actually having to build a fund that lets you use some leverage, though, in many different ways.
Got it. There's a lot to it, but I mean, I guess once you cross over, you start learning different things and everything starts to connect the dots. That can also help you on the other end of what note buyers are looking for. So you can, if you are staying in real estate, you can prep the real estate for your side too.
Well, there's two ways you can drive a car. You can take driver's ed and start out with that car, or you can drive a NASCAR. But you don't have to start out driving a NASCAR, right? And so we try to help connect somebody with what is appropriate for what they want to start with. And we generally think that if somebody kind of comes through our system, and we're able to help people, right? We have a whole done for you on our sister company to find assets and help them do things. And so we pretty much think when somebody kind of comes through a class and does something with us and goes down that road with us, we can have them in an asset in the first 60 days in most cases.
Got it. And I guess the size, really, it's what is your budget to go? How big of an asset are you looking for? How big of a note are you looking for? And there's a size for everyone with a different budget. So
what you can afford and what you can mentally afford.
Yeah.
Meaning,
level of risk.
It's the deal that it ain't the deal you pass up that'll keep you up at night. Don't buy something that'll cause you to be uncomfortable. And so we're pretty good at that. We do a pretty dang good job of like putting people in assets that really suit them.
And you could buy notes on discount if they're already non-performing. You would buy that note at a steep discount, correct, or no?
Yeah.
Interesting. Got it. Huh.
Yeah. We teach non-performing. Really. We have when somebody comes to one of our classes, we have a whole section and do it. And then we show them like, okay, what is kind of a beginner level non-performing note? What could it look like? And maybe we could help you with that with some done for you services. And then on the other hand, like we're just really into people, like what people want. Most people that show up at Note School that have had some experience in other forms of real estate, what they scream is cash flow. Yeah,
predictable, borderline guaranteed cash flow.
That's what they scream, and we do pretty good with that. We do really good with that.
Yeah, and if you can arbitrage off of that and get your cash back to redeploy, then really it's an infinite cycle.
Yeah,
could be close to it. Awesome. Eddie, if somebody wants to reach out to you, learn more about Note School or more about yourself, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, we developed a little lane for your audience if we can. They're going to go to noteschool.com/hustler, right?
I like it.
And then what that's going to do is we're going to take them to like a 2-hour master class where we're going to actually get on the whiteboard and run a lot of numbers and lay it out so people can see it. We're going to answer a lot of questions. And then we have literally probably 8 different resources that we're going to leave behind: books, Excel spreadsheets, tools, flow maps, flow charts, things like that that are going to relate to how people say, like, okay, I see how I could do this. And so it's a pretty good little combination of things that we can do if people register, and they'll just go to noteschool.com/hustler. And we're going to get them signed up in a master class with some great deliverables.
So when they go to this /hustler, the right now it says no results found, but what can they do? Can they, it says home, education, notes, just click on to get more information. What would be?
It'll be live.
It'll be live. Okay, cool.
It'll be good to go and live. And
Like
we just want to do that because we sell this class.
Got it.
But we're giving it to your audience. And so that's why we want to be very specific in how we do it. So, yeah.
No, Eddie, I love it, man. I love it. That's and it's huge. It's good to know it's good to know every side of the industry that you're in. Real estate, it's good to know the back side, front side. I mean, it's all about if you're full vertically integrated. I mean, it's real estate's just it can take you anywhere. Definitely appreciate your time today, Eddie. Look forward to following you, and we will certainly be talking soon. Thank you.
Great.